Get started. So welcome everyone. It's good to see you all, and thanks for joining us today for our mid-session update with the Maryland Chamber's Government Affairs Associate, Maddie Wojtek. So I know some of you may be confused because we had previously advertised that our speaker would be Andrew Griffin from the Maryland Chamber, but an urgent issue popped up and he and Maddie work so closely together on all of these issues. So I know we're in wonderful hands with Maddie. So if you have any questions throughout the program, you can go ahead and add them in the chat box, and we'll also have time for Q&A later in the event. With such a small group, you'll just be able to unmute yourself and ask your questions. We also encourage you to add your contact information into the chat box, and then we'll share that with the group following the event in case there's any new friends you want to follow up with. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today's presentation. Maddie Wojtek began her career in Annapolis at the Maryland Retailers Association as their legislative and membership director. During her tenure, she worked on a wide range of legislative issues at both the state and local levels and led multiple membership recruitment campaigns. In 2019, Maddie joined the Hogan-Rutherford administration as the governor's executive assistant, where she handled the governor's day-to-day operations and long-term planning. Maddie was born and raised in Maryland and attended Towson University, where she obtained a Bachelor of Science degree in political science. So now I will turn it over to you, Maddie. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Christy. And as she said, Andrew unfortunately had an issue. He is not a blonde female, but we work very closely together. So I have all the same information, for better or for worse. So I'm going to give you guys kind of an update on what's still alive, what's still kicking, and what is dead. For those of you that know, yesterday was crossover, and that is the date that all of the bills from the Senate or the House need to cross over into the opposing chamber. If it doesn't do that by midnight, the likelihood of it actually becoming law are very slim. I don't say that it's impossible because weirder things have happened. It just has to go through some extra hurdles. It's definitely less likely that if a bill hasn't crossed over, I see we have a little visitor. If a bill hasn't crossed over, it still could potentially become law, but it will have to go to the Rules Committee. It's an extra hearing. It kind of runs out the clock for those. So crossover was yesterday. A lot of bills got voted out of every chamber. So I'm going to kind of give you guys an update on where we are. So I'll start with energy and environment. So climate change. I know this is a big one for everybody. We knew this was coming in the beginning of session. We actually had a meeting with the House Chairman, Kumar Barbe, and he told us that something would most likely be changing or passing. In the past, Kumar has been the one that kind of stopped a lot of the legislation, and he was pretty adamant to us that something's going to pass this year. He didn't know what, but something was going to pass. So fast forward to the start of session, Chairman Pinsky, so he's the chair of the Senate Education, Health, and Environment Committee, introduced his Climate Solutions Now bill. That's Senate Bill 528. This was a massive, massive piece of legislation. It had us becoming completely electrified, so actually completely removing gas. So new builds, whether they're commercial or residential, would not be allowed to have natural gas. And then eventually anything that already had those would be phased out, and all of those buildings would have to be retrofitted. So a huge, huge financial burden. A lot of businesses were like, we're already trying to comply with what the UN goals are, and now you're going to move that goalpost up. So the hearing went, there was a lot of opposition, there was a lot of skepticism, but because Pinsky is the chair of the committee that the bill was going through, it was heavily, heavily amended. It has been watered down, but it did pass out of committee. Andrew and I have unfortunately not been as involved with this bill as much as we would have liked. There have been some other pressing issues, which I'll get to later in my kind of spiel. But from what we have been told, the bill is a lot better, but it still is concerning. The bill is now over in the House. The kind of approach that the House took this year was they introduced two different pieces of legislation. So instead of having one big bill like Chairman Pinsky did, they had two bills. And they were slightly different, but basically the same. Those bills basically had very similar hearings. There was a lot of skepticism, a lot of opposition, sorry. And those bills never moved. So those are still in the House. And obviously, because we are past crossover, if they do pass out, which I highly, highly doubt, they would have to go to the Senate Rules Committee. It's not going to happen. From what we are being told, the House is going to take Chairman Pinsky's bill, which is now jointly assigned to the Environment and Transportation Committee and the House Economic Matters Committee, and amend it further. So we are very hopeful that we can get to a good place with this bill. Obviously, the next couple weeks will be very telling. Something is going to pass, though, and I keep on going back to that conversation that we had with Chairman Barbe at the beginning of session, which is we're going to see something, whether it's something little or something big. We're not quite sure, but at this point, because that bill has been watered down so much, and kind of where the House has been, we have a feeling that it's not going to get worse. If anything, it'll stay the same or maybe get better. So we will be watching that closely. The utilities are working very, very hard on that bill, but fingers crossed we can continue to move that bill in a very good kind of path forward. Any questions on climate change? No? All right, I'm going to move on to cyber and technology. So one of the issues that's kind of taken up a lot of Andrew and I's time, and we kind of didn't expect this, is a piece of legislation that has to do with biometrics. So we've kind of been seeing this trend. This bill has been introduced in many states. It's actually been enacted in a handful of states now. And we've seen this bill, I think this is the second year that it's been introduced. But essentially it's regulating the biometrics that companies are collecting and also processing. So, and I can actually read for you what they consider biometric data. So this would be a fingerprint, a voice print, an eye retina, an eye iris. And then they go on to list all of the different things that they consider not. The bill is very concerning. We've seen it introduced in 2 other states first. One state did it very well, and the other state was an absolute disaster. So Illinois was the one that actually took this upon themselves first. And the reason why their bill was such a disaster was because it had a private right of action connected to it. This obviously led to over 1,000 class action lawsuits, a lot of law firms setting up boutique law firms that are literally just dedicated to suing businesses that are collecting this data. And this is part of the digital age. Like, this isn't something that businesses are doing to be, to do harm. They're doing this to improve security and products that they offer consumers. So Illinois was the worst case example. And that is unfortunately what our bill was modeled after. However, Texas does have similar legislation. And Texas actually had the Attorney General enforcing their bill, and that was obviously much more controlled. Unless there was an actual situation that had merit to it, you didn't see, the 1,000+ class action lawsuits. So obviously we much prefer what Texas did. So the House introduced a bill and the Senate also introduced a bill. The House amended their bill. I will say that we got a couple of the things that we were looking for. The private right of action is still in the bill. It has been limited, but it's still in the bill. I know there are a lot of casinos that have concerns, a lot of hospitals and research institutions that have concerns. We're kind of, and biometrics, I know, is not a sexy topic. A lot of people don't even know what it is. And frankly, I still feel like I'm learning about it, but I can tell you, you should look at this bill. You should talk to your employees, whoever's with you in your business, to figure out if you touch any of this stuff, because it is very far reaching. And I feel like the more people look at the bill, the more they say, oh, wait, we do that. This actually includes us. It seems like every week somebody's coming out of the woodwork being like, whoa, wait, I just noticed this, and this is a huge problem for us. So the House bill was amended. It's obviously better, but we still have concerns. It's now crossed over to the Senate. The Senate is going to work from the House bill. They have made very clear to us that they will work on further amending the bill. What those amendments look like, we're not quite sure, but we are working very closely with committee members, again, to completely strip the private right of action. I mean, that is our #1 goal right now, and replace it with the Attorney General, because at the end of the day, we know this bill has to have teeth. We know we're not going to get it without teeth. And it's always so interesting to me because the Attorney General's office comes in and they say, we can't enforce this. We don't have the time. We don't have the resources. Meanwhile, they have introduced multiple bills this session that expand their enforcement authority. And I'm like, well, wait. You have time and resources for that, but you don't for this. And I find that very interesting. And I think the committee also understands that. So we are very hopeful that we will get that taken out. We will see. Obviously, anything can happen. Things change just like that. But I'm very hopeful that we will make some headway on that bill. Any questions? Nope. All right. We're going to move on to labor and employment. And I know this is an issue that a lot of people are watching and are very intrigued by. So the Family Medical Leave Insurance Program. I sometimes refer to this as the Family or the Time to Care Act because that's the cute name that it was given. The Senate and the House have passed widely different versions of this bill. So the Senate actually passed a program. The Senate bill, while it has, it's improved from what was introduced. Employees, I think, contribute, it's either 75 or 80% into the fund, and then employers are 20 or 25%. It was kind of interesting in committee. So as the bill was introduced, somebody could take up to 24 weeks off under the bill. In committee, Senator Klausmeier actually introduced an amendment to remove that extra 12 weeks, and it was accepted, which was kind of a win for us. It went to the floor. The Senate president was not happy that that amendment was put in, and it was actually taken off on the floor, just barely, but it was taken off. So that bill has actually passed over into the House. It is an actual program. It has a lot of issues. Originally, we were in conversations with the Senate president's office because we weren't sure what the House was going to do. We figured they might actually decide to pass a program this year. So we were talking to the Senate president's office on all, the laundry list of issues that we have with this bill. And it eventually got to the point where we were like, we're not going to be able to work out every single one of these issues by sine die, which is April 11th. I mean, programs smaller than this one that I've worked on in the past have taken 2 legislative sessions and lots of interim work groups to pass. This one, they were trying to pass in 45 days. I mean, we didn't even start working on this issue on day 1 of session. We started working on it on day 45. There was no way we were going to make this program workable on that timeline. The House, interestingly enough, who tends to be the more liberal body, actually came to us and said, hey, we understand that now is not the time to pass this, that we're not going to be able to pass a good program. Let's do a commission. Now, and I recommend that everybody talk about this by using the word commission, not study, because we've studied this issue before. We actually did in either 2016 or 2017. It was a House and Senate work group over the interim. We had some business leaders, we had some advocates on it. But basically what that study did was it looked at a completely employee-funded program that was run by the state. It didn't look at anything else. And there are a lot of different options for this kind of legislation. I mean, it could be privately run. It could be run by the state and a private organization. I mean, there's so many different variables to this kind of program. So that work group only looked at one variable. And that's why we've decided to go with the commission route. This commission will look at everything from how much an employee should contribute, how much an employer should contribute, whether it should be in the state's hands or private. How much money do we need to have in the fund to make it workable? Because that is one of the really big questions that we have right now. What if the fund runs out? What if we don't have enough money? what happens? It's not federally backed like unemployment insurance. We can't go to the feds. Once it's gone, it's gone. So this commission will look at that. It's got advocates, it's got business leaders, we will be on it, NFIB will be on it, retail will be on it. It's got economists, it's got people from the Senate and the House. But the real big thing, and this is what I always try to flag for people, it does have intent language in it. So it does say that the state has to put in their 2023 budget $25 million to prop up the commission and the fund. The commission has to report out to the General Assembly by the end of this year, and they have to come up with a kind of framework to establish this program by June of 2023. Now, that timeline is tight. We would have definitely liked it to be much farther out, but compared to what we are looking at from the Senate, this is much more doable, and we can work with this. So we are obviously 100% behind what the House is doing. Politics would say in an election year, we're going to pass the commission. The House has told us that they know us as the business community. They also fear what the Hogan administration will do, which is label this as a payroll tax and say that you guys passed a payroll tax in an election year. And that will put a lot of their vulnerable senators and delegates in a very, very sticky situation. So that's why, and they understand that this kind of program polls very well. So they want to give them something, but they don't exactly want to give them the payroll tax. So politics would say that we're going to go with the House. That's what's going to end up passing, but we're actually not 100% sure on that. There is a fear of ours that the advocates and the Senate are going to put a lot of pressure on the House to do something with their bill. Because again, the House bill is now in the Senate and the Senate bill is now in the House. They passed them out at almost the exact same time. I don't think the Senate's going to do anything with the commission. And our fear again is that the House is going to become so pressured that they're going to actually pass something out. So we're going to come up, and Andrew and I haven't sat down yet, but we're going to kind of have to figure out a strategy to put a lot of pressure on the Speaker, House Economic Matters Committee, but also just anyone in the House to be like, you cannot do this. This is not well thought out. You have your program in the commission. There is intent language. We're going to get this, but we need to do it the right way. So Christy, I will probably be reaching out to you for help on that side. But for now, that is what we're kind of fearing and giving us a little heartburn. But that is where we are on paid family leave. It's could be a better situation, but also could be worse. Dwayne, I saw you come off mute.
Thank you, Maddie. Thanks for your work on this. What a mess.
Yeah.
Do you know the terms of the commission? I.e., are we likely to see this next year? So are we just punting for a year? So we're not in an election year?
We are basically punting it. Yes, that's exactly what we're doing. They have to report out at the end of 2022. And then by, I think it's like June 2023, I'd have to go back and look at the actual intent language. But I think by June 2023, they want to have like a program set up and people paying into it. Not necessarily saying that you can take leave, but you would be paying into it. So the commission from, I think they're supposed to start meeting on like June 1st. From June 1st until December 31st, have to figure out all of these nuances and, you know, who's paying what and where are we paying it and how much leave are you going to get and when can you take it and who approves it. All of those details will have to be worked out between June and December.
Okay. And this is the typical political commission with 2 appointees from the Speaker and 2 from the Senate President and 1 from the governor and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I didn't see anything too crazy in it.
Yeah.
The only thing that kind of, irritated us was that it did have 1 more advocacy group than it did business group. But the Retail Association wasn't included in the original bill and they got added in.
Oh, wow.
So now we are even.
Okay, good.
It's better. Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So that's what we have on the labor side. That's still kind of out there floating in the ether. We're not quite sure what's going to happen, but we know something will happen. The other thing, and some people have brought this up, and I hesitate bringing it up because I don't want to get anybody's hopes up, but both sides could dig their heels in and not agree on anything, and then we don't get anything. But I do think, and I don't know if anybody watched President Ferguson's press conference from a little over a month ago, but he was adamant on the record in front of press saying that he was going to pass something. So remains to be seen. We're going to keep a very close eye and pulse on this issue. And hopefully we either end up with nothing or a commission. So. And then on the side of things that are not moving, especially on labor stuff, so fair scheduling, or like I like to call it restricted scheduling, that actually was introduced for a couple years, dating 2015 to 2016 to 2017, and then it went away. It now came back this year, which was interesting. We were like, why are you bringing this back this year? That bill was actually voted unfavorably, which is great. There was a bill to raise the minimum wage. That actually has not been voted on at all, but it hasn't moved. Obviously, we're past crossover. It's not going anywhere, especially not in an election year. On the tax front, I know some people are concerned with combined reporting. That threat is always hanging over our head in the state of Maryland. That bill is not going anywhere. We were told pretty confidently that they would not be touching that issue in an election year. So it has been somewhat quiet. Again, it's just quiet because it's an election year. We're going to come back full force next year, and it's going to be open season. But that's where we are right now, guys. Any questions, any bills that I didn't touch on? I mean, we follow so much that I could probably go on for hours.
I have a question. In regards to the family leave, did they say why they were trying to push so quickly? Especially, you mentioned election year for sure, but then looking at the last stats for, I think it was for January, or maybe it was even the first couple of months, we've lost, 9,000 jobs in Maryland. We've got an increase in, minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know what the reason for the push is.
And your guess is probably as good as mine. We were told pretty confidently prior to session from both the House and the Senate that they would not be passing any sort of program. The House obviously stayed true to that promise. The Senate is what flip-flopped. And I still, to this day, have not figured out what caused Senator Ferguson to flip-flop. And our CEO is actually pretty close to him. She was having conversations with him prior to the press conference that he had a couple months ago. And all of her conversations with him, he was saying, we need to study this. We need to figure out how much needs to be in the fund. And then next thing we know, he holds this press conference that is like, we're going to pass something. And none of us have been able to figure out what happened. And a part of me wonders if maybe the advocates got to him, but I just can't imagine them putting that much pressure in such a short amount of time. So I'm not sure. I think, if you really want to dig deep, Bill Ferguson is a relatively new president. I think he's a little insecure in his position. He's always worried that somebody's going to challenge him, somebody more progressive. So he could be acting out to try to say, hey, I am progressive. You don't need anything more than me to keep that position. But again, all speculation. I wish I could tell you what happened. But it's still so odd to me because the House tends to be the more liberal body. They're the ones that tend to pass out a lot of stuff that I'm like, whoa, we need to fix this. And the Senate is the one that fixes it. So it's very odd to me that it's reversed right now.
Yeah, me too. Actually, as we have, still so many open jobs, and we have people that are still, applying for unemployment for the first time. So it's a lot of stuff going on at the same time. Yeah.
And then you're going to pile on, somebody being out for 12 to 24 weeks on top of that. And you've got to hire a contract person, whatever it may be, for 24 weeks. And then when the original employee comes back, Are you going to fire that contract employee? Like, what are you going to do? They just, helped you out for 24 weeks. There's a lot of, it's just very poor timing.
Got it. Thank you. I think that was it for my question. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Maddie, are you seeing them scramble much with the new primary date and the fact that it really looks more and more likely all the time that we're going to be redrawing districts? And I think that's probably another reason why nobody wants to do anything particularly bad this year, because they're in big trouble if they're in a purple district.
Yep. And I think there have even been, when I watched the voting session in House Economic Matters Committee for the commission, and even the floor session, Chairman Wilson mentioned multiple times, like, let's hope we're all still here. Let's keep in mind, guys, that we are running for election. We might not be here.
Wow.
So, it is being thought about, at least in the House. I have not heard the same thing in the Senate, though. So
They're just quieter. They're all thinking that.
They're all talking about it behind closed doors.
Well, what are some of the wins from session so far? I know we testified on a couple of bills that we wanted to pass, and I believe that they did. Childcare bills, there were some waiving of fees for LLCs and increasing the business personal property limit and things like that. You want to go over some of the positives?
Yeah, so there actually
only a
have,
few.
there have been some wins, and I always push them aside because I'm dealing with the current fires over here. But there have been some wins. There's been a lot of childcare stuff that has been passed, a lot of stuff that has to do with the scholarship programs, offering, scholarships before the approval even goes through, padding the fund a little bit more. There have been a lot of really good childcare stuff that has gone through. Prior to session, that is what we constantly were hearing from members saying, we've got guys that would love to come back to work, but childcare is just a huge barrier for them. So we have seen some really good things in that front. There have been some, fee waiving bills that have gone through. I know the governor's office had a corporate filing fee. It would eliminate the corporate filing fee bill. I don't think that one moved, but there were a whole slew of other ones. There were bipartisan ones. It's great to see people working together. Like Christy said, there was personal property exemption. There definitely was some good stuff that came out of this session. Another one of the things that we had worked on, and this is just a little nugget of good news, but I feel like it does go a long way for certain people. So as some of you remember, the Netflix tax that was passed in 2020, I believe, there was some ambiguity in the language. The comptroller's office was saying, there are certain business enterprise software purchases that were potentially going to be taxed under the statute, but were never supposed to be taxed. And the comptroller's office was like, we really need to fix the statute in order to just protect everybody and make sure that nobody's paying more than they actually should be. So we pushed through a bill that would clarify that. So there's a lot more clarity there. A lot of businesses don't have to worry about that and constantly have to harass the comptroller's office about, is this taxed or is this not? So that was a definite win for us. McCormick and Under Armour, a lot of Baltimore and Maryland-based businesses were very happy to see that passed. There was also relating to the comptroller's office, a bill relating to private letter rulings. So when a CPA or a business owner, or any individual really has a question about a statute and they want to get more clarity on it, this bill would allow them, either individual or business, to reach out to the comptroller's office and request a private letter ruling that basically says either it gives them tax advice and it's legally binding. The state of Maryland didn't have that. Now they do. And it will be very helpful for businesses because before, you just kind of had to fly out on a whim and, figure out, is this correct or is it not? And the comptroller's office had no obligation to actually tell you the correct answer. I will say that bill, as introduced, would have had the letters expiring every 3 years, which our guys didn't love because they were like, a lot of times the facts of these cases aren't changing. So why should a business or an individual have to constantly be reapplying for these private letter rulings? So we actually tried to get the expiration removed completely unless the facts of the case change. We couldn't get the committee to go for that, but they did push it up to 7 years, which is a little bit better. So that's another win for businesses, provides more clarity, makes the comptroller's office hire legal counsel to explain these issues. So
That's a big one. I hadn't heard about that. That's a great win by the chamber. Good job.
Yeah.
That's big.
Yeah. Thanks, Dwayne.
Wow.
I know I like forget about all of our priorities once we start to get into like the putting out different fires, but there were definitely some good things and some things that you really only tend to get during election years, which are, the business personal property tax stuff and the filing fee tax and all of that kind of stuff. You can finally get some good things. So.
What other questions do we have?
Is there anything happening with decoupling the automatic increase in the gas tax? It's currently coupled with inflation.
Yeah, and Dwayne, correct me if I'm wrong, but that kind of debate came up when the gas tax holiday was discussed, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I have not heard anything else on that front. I doubt we will actually see something this session.
Yeah.
And this session would have been the best session to see it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we have to wait 4 years and then everybody's going to forget about this. But no, I have not heard any further discussion on it. I don't have high hopes that we would see something like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else? We have a quiet group today, but we have weighed in on a lot of the bills that the Maryland Chamber weighed in on, and we work very, very closely with them. Your entire staff has been wonderful this year, explaining a lot of things to our committee and helping us to make our voices be heard. So we appreciate all your support.
Absolutely, Christy. And we definitely appreciate you guys weighing in on these issues. I mean, it's one thing to hear from the Maryland Chamber. It's another thing for elected officials to hear from their local chamber or their local businesses. I mean, that is huge when an elected official hears from a business in their district that says, hey, I reside in your district, I employ people in your district. It means so much more to an elected official.
Yeah.
And it can really have an impact. So I encourage everybody, when they can, make sure that your voice is heard.
Definitely. I have a question, and I don't remember what the bill number was, but it was one about cosmetology. Was that correct, Christy?
Yes, so we testified in favor of that. The Maryland Chamber chose not to weigh in because it was just one industry that we were talking about. It was basically to allow licensed salons to have more than one apprentice at the same time. So I think it just increased it to 2, which would allow the industry to grow, more people to be able to I guess the choice is you can go to cosmetology school, which can be expensive and limit people's opportunities, or you can do an apprenticeship under a licensed salon. So one of our members actually brought it to our attention. I hadn't heard about it, and we weighed in support of that. And I heard it was a very positive conversation. I don't know where that wound up, though.
I was going to say, if you happen to remember the bill number, happy to
have
look
it.
it up and let you know.
I'll send you a note after this,
Okay.
and then we can circle back with everybody.
Yeah. Great workforce development bill.
Yeah, it seemed like a win-win for everyone involved. And the salons need the help also. And, people are looking for that opportunity, and sometimes it's cost prohibitive. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of workforce development, Maddie, you reminded me, so the last few years, there's been this onslaught of attacking the governor's various tax credits for like enterprise zones and more jobs for Maryland and
Yep.
the cyber credit and all these things. Have they been doing that much this year?
So again, we saw some bills that came in to limit enterprise zones and economic development tax credits. Those have not moved, thankfully.
Good.
I know there was one in the House that kept on showing up on the Ways and Means voting list, but I don't think it made it out in time. And that had to do with the enterprise zones. But the economic development tax bill that Delegate Feldmark introduced, that did not go anywhere, thankfully, because I know she passed a bill last year.
It was a bad one too.
The More Jobs for Marylanders program, that was up for an extension this year. That bill, I do believe, passed out of the Senate. It was supposed to have a House hearing, but for some reason they had to cancel it. So hopefully we see that through. But yeah, I mean, that drumbeat, that attack on what they deem, business welfare is still happening. And it'll probably come back in full force next year. I hate to be doomsday, but it probably will. I think that will continue. That trend will 100% stick around.
It's amazing.
Which is unfortunate.
Just so everybody knows what we're talking about, there are all these tax credits set up literally to attract employers to Baltimore City, Western Maryland, and the Eastern Shore, the three places where we desperately need jobs. And the legislature's been attacking those credits for 3 years now, which is just the most short-sighted thing I can imagine.
Yep. Delegate Julia Polakovich-Carr, I think, termed it corporate welfare. Pretty much any bill that a business touches, she does not vote for. I think she was the sole person that voted against our digital product bill in the House Ways and Means, and then even on the House floor, it was almost unanimous except for her. And the bill literally has no fiscal impact. It's just clarifying language. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else? Question?
I know, I'm talkative today. One more. It was I just saw it. It was Senate Bill 658, the airport noise bill. That's what I'm calling it. But BWI specifically, I know a few of the county executives testified. Do you know where that is?
So I will say the chamber did not weigh in on that bill. Can you give me the bill number one more time?
It's Senate Bill 658.
So that actually, I mean, it had its hearing on March 9th and it has not received a vote, so it didn't cross over. Let me see if it has a cross file. Yeah, it does. And the House cross file didn't move either. So I would, again, I don't like to say it's dead because you never say never during the 90-day session. But if they try to move that, it's facing an uphill battle. So.
Got it. Thank you.
Adrienne, did you have anything to add to that? I know we were working with your team on that one.
I just wanted to say we're not for it because it's anti-airport growth. Its founding is really in some citizens that are affected by the FAA's change a couple of years ago. And when the FAA changed some things with flights, they went to like a more automated program. There are some new people that are getting noise. I guess the folks that had airplane noise in their neighborhoods were pretty used to it. So we had some very vocal folks, and that's what the founding is. And they don't want the airport to get a new runway. They don't want the maintenance facility. It's really anti-growth and it's not good for business. So we are hoping it doesn't pass, and we've had several chambers support the airport's position, and we appreciate that.
All right. Well, fingers crossed. Any other questions? Last call. We've had a great discussion though. We covered a lot of the big stuff.
Thank you, Maddie.
Yeah, no problem. Always here.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. As I said, this has been a really great session, and we do hope that you'll tune in for some of our future webinars and events. One important one I wanted to mention is our Spirit of Community Awards event is Monday evening. That's at Live Casino Hotel. They're actually one of our Legislative Affairs Committee members. This is our most feel-good event of the year, and we give out awards to public servants like Military Service Member of the Year, police officers, firefighters, teachers, and administrators of the year, and many more. So if you sign up today by 5 p.m., you could still secure a ticket. So right after this call, you can log in and grab your ticket. A little later in the year, April 6th, we'll have our mid-year economic update with Tom Barkin, who's the president of the Richmond Federal Reserve Bank. We also have a multi-chamber breakfast coming up on April 7th and an evening networking event on April 14th that will be at the Maryland Jockey Club. So registration for all of these events and many more are located at our website, which is www.centralmarylandchamber.org. And again, I just want to thank Maddie Wojtek from the Maryland Chamber and Andrew, you'll have to tell him we missed him today, for all of your support throughout session and supporting our Legislative Affairs Committee. Our partnership with you all allows us to keep our chamber members up to date on all the current issues and breaking news from the General Assembly session. So thank you again for all your help. And if anybody would be interested in learning more about our Legislative Affairs Committee, you can just let me know after the call. So thank you all for being here, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.